Good afternoon, and welcome to the Lethbridge City Council meeting for Tuesday, March the 9th, sorry. I'll begin with the reconciliation statement. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we're gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. We'll now move on to bouquets. Okay, we'll do a roll call first.
Okay. Councillor Carlson.
Present.
Councillor Kaufman.
Present.
Councillor Croson.
Present.
Councillor Morrow.
Yeah.
Councillor Parker.
Present.
Acting Mayor Higgin.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Present.
Mayor Spearman.
Present.
Councillor Campbell.
Present.
All counted for. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to bouquets. Starting with Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. We're one day late from International Women's Day, so I'd like to just celebrate some of the women elected officials in the recent history in Lethbridge. The late Dr. Barbara Lacey, Bridget Pasteur, who was also an MLA, Liz Iwaski, Margaret Simmons, Bridget Mearns, our own Belinda Croson, MLAs and Minister Shannon Phillips, Maria Fitzpatrick, and Rachel Harder. And I'd like to celebrate the fact that not a lot of women enter into City Council to run for office, and we'd like to see a lot more, and celebrating the women that actually did and were elected.
Thank you. We hope that women will be represented as candidates in the forthcoming election in October. Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to give a big shout out to an organization that maybe doesn't get as much publicity as perhaps they deserve. Prairie Baseball Academy. It's been around for many years, which is creating a real opportunity for young athletes to pursue baseball, but also to receive an excellent education. And they've just recently announced their Hall of Fame inductees in the builders category, and since this is International Women's Day, or it was, Shirley McClellan was announced as one of the candidates, or not candidates, but as inductees into the Hall of Fame. Also want to acknowledge Clint Dunford and Rick Williams, who are also in the Prairie Baseball Academy Hall of Fame, and look forward to the continued success of that organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. A bit of a sad message to share with our community and members of council. One of our colleagues from our sister city, Saint Laurent, Quebec, passed away, Mr. Maurice Cohen. He will be well known to actually many members of our community. He was on council in Saint Laurent for 35 years, and in that time made many, many trips to Lethbridge to bring students and seniors here and take them back to Saint Laurent in an exchange of friendship and cultural exchanges. Maurice was here many, many times. I remember one of my first times meeting him. We took a group of seniors down to Fort Whoopop, and Maurice sat on a hay bale outside. I said, Maurice, don't you want to see it? He said, I've been here 17 times. I could give the tour by now. So Maurice is well known to Lethbridge. He will be dearly missed, and just wanted to share our condolences with our colleagues out in Saint Laurent. I know their hearts are heavy right now. Thank you, Mayor Spearman.
Yes. We certainly share their and extend condolences to our colleagues in Saint Laurent. Councillor Kaufman?
Nothing, Mayor Spearman.
Okay. Councillor Morrow?
Nothing, thanks.
Councillor Croson?
Nothing, thank you.
Councillor Parker?
I just wanted to add on to Councillor Carlson in regards to Maurice Cohen. Maurice is just it will be greatly missed. And, you know, he played a huge impact in my life as well. He meant so much to so many people, not only in St. Laurent, but also in Lethbridge. And I don't want to sound too redundant to what was said already, but he will be greatly missed. I'm glad I had the privilege of participating in the virtual ceremony for his farewell this past weekend. And I just want everyone to know, especially his son Jack, who's a member of council, that our thoughts and prayers are with him and his family at this time, and their community as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Acting Mayor Higgin.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Yes, I just want to let the community know that the Lethbridge Hurricanes, our community team, is back to playing. They started off with a rough first weekend with 2 losses to Edmonton, and you're able to watch them, those fans, online. There's packages that can be purchased to watch that online. As well as I want to mention is we know that there will be some serious struggles with not having fans in the seats and some of the costs that come along with having the team play. And so they do have the government has set up a 50-50 draw weekly, and it's something that you can purchase. It runs Alberta wide. So I just wanted to be able to reach out, and if there's anyone wants to support that through the 50-50 or to buy viewership to watch the games for those fans, I'm sure they will greatly enjoy them.
Excellent, thank you. Great to have the Hurricanes back. Yep. My bouquet goes out to everybody who's continuing to keep everybody safe. I think the numbers we were seeing in Lethbridge recently are concerning. The numbers are rising in Lethbridge, where they're going down across the province and down across the South Zone. But in the last few weeks, our numbers have gone from less than 200 active cases to almost 300 active cases, and we're the exception to the rule. So it's an important message. We all have to keep each other safe and continue to do so. Thank you to those who are doing their best, observing the health regulations and making sure that they keep their families, their neighbors, and their loved ones safe. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. I have a resolution from Deputy Mayor Miyashiro. Be it resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of City Council held on Tuesday, February the 23rd be approved, and the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to sign the same. And further be it resolved that City Council received for information the status of directed resolutions for March the 9th, 2021. And further be it resolved that City Council adopt the recommendation contained in the following Standing Policy Committee reports: the Recreation and Culture Master Plan, the 2021 Public Art Work Plan, and designation of Municipal Historic Resource Plan. Designation of Municipal Historic Resource. Further, be it resolved that Council receive for information the following reports: the Operational Review Implementation Plan Update, the Monthly Council Work Plan Update for February 2021, and the Inquiry and Response Multi-Family Recycling. And further be it resolved that City Council give first reading to Bylaw 6270, Land Use Bylaw Amendment 2425, 30th Street West. Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Thank you very much, Mayor Spearman. And there are a lot of items on this consent agenda. I'd open it up for questions from my colleagues.
Are there any questions from Council? Councillor Croson.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question of the chair of the Cultural and Social. I believe that is Councillor Campbell, with regards to the three items being brought forward by your SPC. Just because the Recreation and Culture Master Plan and the Public Art Work Plan are in there. For myself and for the community, what are some highlights that your SPC saw when that was presented, and what are the things we should know about it before if we agree to pass it?
Well, I guess some of the highlights was that it was a comprehensive look into the plan. They did a tremendous amount of work and consultation with not only the city but also with members of council, and I think it's highlights, I don't know if I can kind of give a highlight, but just I thought it was a great overview of what's important for the city. I don't know if any of my other colleagues have any other comments on that.
Any other member of the committee would like to speak and provide additional information? Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Spearman. Mine is actually a question as well. I don't know if Councillor Croson is done with her line of questioning.
Mr. Harper's on the line as well as Mr. Roma for the Recreation Culture Master Plan. And Ms. Bracken's on the line also for the Public Art Work Plan. So if there's any questions, if any of those people wanted to answer Councillor Croson's broad question of highlights, please do so.
Yeah, what should the community be aware of? What's any different? What do we need to know if we agree to pass this?
I see a hand up.
I can speak to some of that. I'm sure Mike, Mr. Roma would be willing to speak as well. As Councillor Campbell mentioned, the engagement process of this was quite significant, which we were quite happy with considering the time frame that it took place in with 2020 and the pandemic. RC Strategies pivoted away from in person and utilized the virtual engagement, but we did see a lot of engagement. I think there was over 3,000 household questionnaires returned, significant stakeholder engagement with our user groups, our partners, specifically fee-for-service as well. Over 45, I think, engagement sessions with various city staff, which included a couple sessions with City Council, which we were very pleased with their participation. Moving forward, the previous plan that we did in 2013 made recommendations. Now, we steered away from recommendations this time to allow a little bit of flexibility for the City of Lethbridge and Rec and Culture to adapt to any changing environment. So we geared them more toward directions than recommendations. I mean, we geared this around specific outcomes that the city itself and Rec and Culture would like to see at the end of the day as a result of offering these Rec and Culture services. Those were really key to the foundation of this plan. And then there was also some specific goals that were a part of that as well. And I'll just our guiding principles. Sorry, so there was 9 guiding principles that were a part of those outcomes as well. So it was really grounded in the outcomes and the guiding principles, and moving forward, you know, over the next 10 years, we're going to be moving in that direction to ensure that those outcomes are met in the community using those guiding principles. So, Mike, do you want to speak on that as well?
You bet. Thanks, Robin, and Councillor Croson through the chair. Thanks for the question. So I do have the good fortune of being involved in the previous plan too, and I would say what's changed with this one is that those foundations that Mr. Harper spoke about are much more clear in this version, and I would say more digestible and easy to use. And throughout the remainder of the plan, those are presented first, but throughout the remainder of the plan, those foundations are referred to in terms of the directions that have been recommended, in terms of suggesting that those should be integrated into everything that the business unit does, as well as calling upon partners, fee-for-service partners, or whomever else to also follow towards that same kind of those same goalposts, I guess. I'd say one maybe difference or enhancement to this plan versus the previous one is I think it calls the business unit and the city to act even more in an even more leadership role as it relates to recreation and culture, and making sure that the delivery system is aware of all of the information they should be aware of, because as you know, it's not just the city that's out there, it's partners, it's volunteers, and so on. And also making sure that the policy frameworks are in place for the city to provide the service in the most efficient way possible, but as well providing as much guidance as the city can to those partners in a strategic sense. And then the only other thing I would maybe highlight is, as it relates to infrastructure, even though there's still some significant projects there that I know City Council has already been contemplating or that may contemplate in the next few years, RE feasibility analysis and that kind of thing. I think the focus is less on building new and meeting unmet demands and more about protecting existing service levels. And that can mean replacing facilities that are aging, but the last plan led to one of your gems, I guess, being developed in terms of recreation and culture provision. And even though, again, there are some infrastructure priorities either confirmed or identified in the plan, I would say that it's as much about protecting existing service levels as it is about expanding service levels. So there's much more than that, Councillor Crowson, but those would be the highlights that I would mention, being familiar with the past plan and obviously this one as well.
Thank you. I know the SPC went into greater detail. I just wanted those highlights. Thank you very much.
So if I could add just something to that, Councillor Crowson, once City Council accepts or receives the master plan, we do have the intention and the plan to work with RC Strategies to really identify those key items in the master plan and engage again with our community partners, whether they're fee for service or whether they're just our stakeholders, to highlight those key areas in the master plan to make sure that everybody, as we move forward, is on the same page as far as what the outcomes were, what the guiding principles were, and where do we go from here. So we're not finished with this yet. Obviously, we're gonna work with RC to take it out to the community and make sure that everybody is aware of the direction we're going.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson?
Councillor Kaufman was ahead of me, but I can ask my question. Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Harper, perhaps. At the SPC, we had discussion. One of the statements in the next steps was to close the loop with the community. And at that time I said, is it premature to approve the plan and then close the loop? Or should we solicit feedback? Realizing that there was 3 weeks between the presentation at the SPC and the discussion to it coming to council, I was wondering if we'd heard any feedback. I was expecting to hear some, and I hadn't heard any from our community, so I'm just wondering if any came through yourselves.
I am not aware of any feedback specifically. We've had a couple verbal questions of some groups that we've had meetings with as to what happens next, etc. But as far as specific feedback on the plan itself, I have not received any.
Okay, thank you. And is it your opinion that that folks are satisfied with this, or should we take some time to let them review it further?
I guess my opinion would be the document has been out there since the SPC meeting. We did send out a notice to all of our stakeholders in our groups that it was out there. Please provide feedback, etc. And then we also highlighted what our next steps were going to be. So I mean, all of those groups have had the opportunity to review and provide feedback. Lacking any of that, I would like to make the assumption that they are happy with it.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
If they were notified and they've had several weeks, I think that's fair notice. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you to the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee for this work as well. The second operative clause coming from the committee states, further be resolved, the City Council adopt the Rec and Culture Master Plan and that council provides direction to implement their directions outlined in the master plan. Can I just get a little clarification perhaps from you, Chairman Campbell, on that? What sort of direction to implement the directions outlined in the master plan council is to provide?
I'll defer to Mr. Harper on this if I could.
Yeah, the directions that we've outlined, I believe there were 9 directions, and they were covering the various aspects of the plan. What we're looking for specifically is just council's blessing, I guess, to move forward and pursue these directions that are outlined in the master plan.
Okay, thank you. So anything involving service, an increase or an improvement to service level or level of service will have to come back to council, or are you asking for in this consent agenda just the blank approval for go ahead and implement it as it's written?
We completely understand that anything that would affect the service level or that is financially based would have to come back and get further approval. Absolutely.
Okay. It's just to prevent that conversation we got into years ago where council approves a master plan, or accepts, receives and files a master plan, doesn't even put their hand up to prove it, and then staff come back saying, well, we're doing this because it's in the master plan. So just to keep lines of communication open to ensure that council is moving in lockstep as well with, or administration is moving in lockstep with council so that everybody's on the same page, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too share some of the same concerns that Councillor Kaufman just brought forward, but I have a couple of questions regarding our consent agenda, and maybe I don't know, maybe someone can help me out and help me understand this. So when I'm looking at the be it resolved that City Council adopt the recommendations contained in the following Standing Policy Committee reports. So I totally understand the process. These reports and recommendations and presentations are made to the Standing Policy Committee, which has 4 members of council in it. They do what they need to do, and then they come back to council, and it's in the consent agenda. I'm a little concerned with this process because, in my mind, these are important documents, and it seems to me that the only way we can create discussion at a council meeting, which is where we vote on these, is if a member of council pulls them out of the consent agenda and separates them and deals with them as a single item. So my question, why are these plans not put into our presentation part of the agenda, where presentations are made so that the public and council who are not on the Standing Policy Committee can get a thorough, better understanding of what took place? I can sense by the questions already today that there's a lot of not uncertainty, but there's a lot of questions that members of council now are going to be putting up their hand. And quite frankly, unless we look at this totally inside and out and totally understand it, it's just approved. So can someone please explain the process and why these would not be made as presentations by the Standing Policy Committee to council?
Who wants to answer Councillor Morrow's question?
I could take a shot, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
That's okay. And I would defer to the governance SPC and the councillors who worked on this model. But from an administration perspective, I would offer that, and this strikes me as a good example of this, that there are some items that clearly should, in my mind, come forward as presentations. And this is one of those. So I think whether that's I think initially that would be the direction of the SPC, but I think also a role for Agenda Review Committee to play as well. And I think this probably just represents a good learning point as we move to this new governance model. But that would be my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. Anyone from governance like to comment?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I actually just in the text thread for people on Teams. I actually just mused about perhaps creating an agenda item for things coming out of SPCs. Specifically, when we're dealing with master plans, we're dealing with large documents or large policy shifts, a different place or a different way to address them. Technically, we haven't even approved the agenda yet. So if members of council are okay, maybe we can add this to the next governance SPC conversation and bring back a recommendation to council as quickly as we can.
Sure.
Thank you both for that. I appreciate that. And I guess, you know, I understand SPC meets, first of all, the SPC, we meet at 1:30 in the afternoon, so people may not be listening, may not be watching, and I know they're all televised. So, and I don't know if they are recorded so that people can watch those meetings. I'm not sure if they are. I do know that they can watch council meetings, although it may be late, but at least they'll understand the work of the committees and what council is approving. So I'm just a little concerned that we are trying to move things quick and without having a better word in my mind. And I'm not saying that this is what we're trying to do, but we're putting things in the consent agenda where we're, you know, we might be hiding important stuff that I think needs to be highlighted by each committee. So thanks for Councillor Kaufman if you discuss that at your committee. Thank you.
Acting Mayor Hagan.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I just want to offer my support because I've had that similar question. I would just like to see, in the perfect world, in my opinion anyways, is that a presentation from that standing policy committee would come to each council meeting and discussion can take place from there. So I thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Kaufman and Councillor Morrow. I would think that's a great idea.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I see there's some others. It's a different process and we're all learning. I'm looking at the 2021 Public Artwork Plan. I see Ms. Bracken is online. And there's some interesting projects built in there. And under the former model, there would be a presentation to council. We would all see what all the projects were. And here it's part of the consent agenda. And I just wonder if it gets the light of day that it should get, just like the other reports. So I would be interested in hearing recommendations back from the Governance Committee as well. Thank you. Okay, anything further on this resolution, the consent agenda resolution? I see no further questions. Deputy Mayor Miyashiro?
Actually, sorry, Mr. Mayor, sorry. My hand went up.
I had a question.
My hand went up a little too late. I'm sorry.
Well, it's okay. Councillor Morrow and Deputy Mayor Hagan will entertain your questions. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to deal with the consent agenda right now. So just so I understand, if I vote in favor of this and approve this, then I'm basically approving everything in those plans that has been that's part of our agenda. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay, I might want to put in a tabling motion for the well, I will put in a tabling motion or a postponement motion for the Recreation and Culture Master Plan and the 2021 Public Work Plan, Art Plan, that they be deferred to the next meeting of council with a presentation.
Okay, so would that be a motion of separation, City Clerk? So basically separating them out and they...
Worship, they really should be pulled from the consent agenda and then they could be tabled.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. If that's the process, then that's the process I'd like to follow. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion proposed by Councillor Morrow is to remove the Recreation and Culture Master Plan and the 2021 Public Art Work Plan from the consent agenda, and further that these two items be tabled to the March 23rd public meeting.
You can do it all in one if you like to do it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
Okay, Councillor Deputy Mayor Miyashiro has seconded that. Any debate? All in favor? Any opposed? Is that unanimous? Okay, so that's unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Morrow. We're now back to the main motion, with Recreation and Culture Master Plan and 2020 Public Art Work Plan removed. Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you to my colleagues for the great discussion. I do recall saying to myself after agenda review last week was, yeah, this isn't going to go well. If there's no more questions or discussion, I'll call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Are any opposed? Thank you. That's unanimous. Now we'll move to adoption of the agenda. Moved by Acting Mayor Higgin that the agenda of the regular meeting of City Council on March the 9th, 2021 be adopted as presented, including all communications as submitted by the City Clerk. Our City Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. There are two changes to the agenda. There's one addition. It's 10.8. It's a verbal in camera titled HR matter. And also in the agenda, there was proposed urgent business, item 6.5. It was a late addition. It still has to be added to the agenda. 6.5 bylaw 6265 municipal development plan public hearings.
Okay, thank you. So that resolution will now read that the agenda of the regular meeting of City Council on March 9th be adopted as amended, including all communications as submitted by the City Clerk. Acting Mayor Higgin.
Thank you. There's nothing additional to add. I'll call for the vote.
Okay, question has been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move right to presentations. There are no presentations. We're moving right to submissions. Penalty on property taxes, 11 Kings Place South, roll 101-94001-1001. Moved by Councillor Carlson. Be it resolved that City Council select one of the options below. Council approve the full amount to waive penalties and credit to the account for $501.05, or Council approves a partial amount to waive penalties and credit to the account that they deem equitable to do so, or Council deny the request. Councillor Carlson, which option are you including in your resolution?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I'll put forward option 1 for debate, please.
Okay, that Council approve the full amount to waive penalties and credit in the amount for $501.05. Mr. Dalton, I believe this is the recommendation of administration. Is that correct?
Our recommendation, Your Worship, was just that Council hear this appeal, or hear this submission. But I'll defer to Ms. Pinkson and whoever may be here to speak to them.
Ms. Pinkson, is there a recommendation from administration?
Yes, Mayor Spearman. Given that these requests come forward from specific citizens, we're often supporting them through that process to bring forward the request for council to consider the tax cancellation. But it is typically administration's recommendation that these be denied, just given the precedence that could set if a specific tax cancellation was approved.
Okay, all right, thank you. I think we understand that. Okay, any further questions from council?
Mr. Spearman, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not sure you can answer this, but I just want to clarify a couple of points. One, that the person requesting the credit to the account or waiving the penalties is a non-resident landowner. Is that correct?
That's, oh, sorry, I'm having technical difficulties here, or somebody is. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's correct. They own property in Lethbridge but do not reside in Lethbridge.
Right. But we don't know if this person owns a number of different properties, seeing as that they forgot to pay the taxes on this one singular property. We don't know if they own a bunch of properties in Lethbridge or other places.
I would have to check, but I can just, if you just give me a brief moment here, I can get a response for you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Miyashiro just got some information back from tax and assessment, and this is the only property that they own in town.
In Lethbridge, all right. And do you know what the property taxes on this property are?
Just let me grab that as well.
Okay. Thank you.
In the package, I think it talked about $4,025.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to find that, but I couldn't. Okay, thank you very much. Answer my question then.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, I see none. Move on to debate. Councillor Carlson.
Thanks, Mayor Spearman. Bringing this forward for council's consideration. I know we're always reticent about setting precedent for these types of things, but I think we're in I think what we keep referring to as unprecedented times. This was, according to all our records, an honest mistake due to travel restrictions caused by COVID. The homeowner, upon notification, immediately made rectification, even made an overpayment to show good faith. I do think this was an honest error with no malice intended, and so I'd suggest that council could make an exception in this case, but I'd love to hear my colleagues debate.
Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Just need to remind my colleagues of Section 347 of the Municipal Government Act that states if a council considers it equitable to do so. So we always have the opportunity to create a precedent. The reality is that this decision is based on a single decision at any one time, and whether or not we feel it is equitable to do so. I think given the mover's statement about the unprecedented times, the good faith shown by the property owner in prepaying the 2021 taxes with an increase, paying off what she owed, that she's demonstrated that she understood she could not get here because of travel restrictions, and has done her best to rectify the situation as it currently stands. So I will support the motion when it's presented.
Any further debate? I'll ask the mover to close.
I thought I
Councillor
saw.
Morrow? Sorry, I just can't see the hands. Councillor Morrow?
I think Councillor Miyashiro, or Deputy Mayor Miyashiro, was before me, Mr. Mayor.
I'm just looking at the list on my screen now, so if you could go first.
Okay, you know, I totally understand what my colleagues have just said, and I can appreciate it. Although we all know that taxes need to be paid. We know that well in advance. Doesn't come as a surprise. So we also know that in today's world, you can be anywhere in the world and you can transfer money and you can pay bills and you can do all that sort of stuff through online banking. So I totally understand. It may be difficult, may have been forgotten, but I just don't see any reason for us to waive this because I totally agree with our city treasurer that if we start doing this, then people are going to start coming up with excuse after excuse after excuse, and some may be very legit. And I'm not saying that these are and this particular case is an excuse to get out of paying it. It could very well be legit, but taxes are taxes, and we know we got to pay them. So because of that, I won't be supporting the resolution.
Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I also will not be supporting this resolution. At this day and age, when you can pay online, as Councillor Moore just said, it strikes me as odd that someone has to actually come to Lethbridge in order to pay their property taxes. We do have a lot of outstanding dollars in property taxes right now, and I think every little bit that we can collect will help.
Anybody else? Okay, I will ask Councillor Carlson to close.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Nothing further to add. I'll just call for the vote.
Okay, thank you. Can we have a vote by roll call, please?
Councillor Kaufman.
Convinced by debate, opposed.
Councillor Crowson.
Opposed.
Councillor Crowson.
Opposed.
Opposed, thank you. Councillor Morrow.
Opposed.
Councillor Parker.
Opposed.
Acting Mayor Hagan.
Opposed.
Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Opposed?
Mayor Spearman.
Opposed?
Councillor Campbell.
Opposed.
And Councillor Carlson.
Opposed.
That is lost, 0-9.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to official business. I have a resolution from Acting Mayor Higgin, Proclamation Green Shirt Day, April 7th, 2021. Whereas April 6th, 2018, Canadians were heartbroken to hear the news of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash. Of the 29 passengers, 16 lost their lives and 13 will bear physical and emotional scars for life. And whereas on April the 7th, 2018, Humboldt Broncos defenseman Logan Bulow succumbed to his injuries, his parents Bernadine and Toby Boulay offered to donate his organs as Logan told his parents he was registering as an organ donor, as he was inspired by his coach and mentor Rick Suggett, who saved 6 lives as an organ donor in 2017. And whereas 6 lives were saved by Logan donating his organs and the news spread of the organ donation by this young hockey player, it is estimated that almost 150,000 people registered to become organ donors in the days and weeks that followed. To date, this is the largest number of Canadians registering to become organ donors in Canadian history due to one event, one person. And whereas Green Shirt Day was created to honor, remember, and recognize all the victims and families of that fatal crash, and to continue Logan's legacy by inspiring Canadians to talk to their families and register as organ donors, therefore be it resolved that Council provide an exception to issue and declare proclamations and request that the Mayor's Office proclaim April 7th, 2021 as Green Shirt Day. Acting Mayor Higgin.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I think my resolution pretty much states, why I'm bringing this forward, and just open it up for questions.
Are there any questions of Acting Mayor Higgin? I see none. I think your resolution speaks for itself. There are no questions. We'll move on to debate. Would you like to open, Acting Mayor Higgin?
I'll see for closing. Thank you, Mayor Spearman.
Is there any debate? Councillor Miyashiro?
Thank you. Thank you, Acting Mayor Higgin, for bringing this forward. I fully support this proclamation.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Also, thank you, Acting Mayor Hagan, for bringing it forward today. It's perfect timing to get this passed now. My understanding of the reason that we limited proclamations was because of the inundation. It's always been my opinion that council can issue proclamations. It's just we don't want to be flooded with them. But when one comes forward that is very appropriate, I think it's important that council stand up and support it. So thank you for bringing it forward. You have my full support.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just sometimes it's the right thing to do, and this is the right thing to do. So I thank you, Councillor Higgins, for bringing it forward, because I know with the tragedy brings some amazing stories, and because of that tragedy here in the city, there's a gal who said, I am going to donate an organ, and so she donated her own kidney voluntarily to someone, anonymously, and that sort of story can repeat itself when we create these proclamations on a day such as this, where people can reflect and look to helping their fellow being, and just help society in general. So I will be supporting.
Thank you. I too will support. This isn't just a day, this is a cause. And I hope that the message is to encourage more people to consider organ donation. That is what Logan wanted, and that's what Logan inspired. It shouldn't be a one-year event or it should be ongoing. It should be a reminder. And the more people who can live full lives and longer lives because of the generosity of others and the forethought of others, the better. And that's what Green Shirt Day should mean. And for those reasons, I will support this resolution. Anybody else? I'll ask Acting Mayor Higgin to close.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and thank you very much to my colleagues for the debate. I appreciate the support. It was spoken about earlier from one of my colleagues regarding why we're doing this each year, and that we don't do a proclamation across the board. And I appreciate that, because it's something that it's kind of two-part. The way that I see it is that it gives the opportunity for us to discuss this each year, rather than just having a proclamation that is ongoing. So I just think it's extremely important. Again, my resolution kind of speaks to how many individuals, the 6 lives that Logan had saved, and not just that, but the multiple other individuals of over 150,000 that have signed up for this. So again, I appreciate my colleagues' support, and I'm hoping we're all wearing green shirts on April the 7th. Thank you.
Thank you. Question has been called. All in favor? Are any opposed? There are none. It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. I now have a resolution from Councillor Crowson, creating a diverse and inclusive workforce for the City of Lethbridge. Whereas the City of Lethbridge recognizes that a diverse and workforce makes full, effective use of the broad range of talents, abilities, and perspectives found among our residents, and whereas the City of Lethbridge believes that all residents should be respected, valued members of the community with a stake in the future of Lethbridge, and whereas an equity, diversity, and inclusion lens is an analytical tool that helps ensure city policies, programs, and services result in equitable outcomes for all residents, removing systemic barriers for both city employees and residents to facilitate the full participation of everyone. And whereas on November the 12th, 2019, Lethbridge City Council expressed their commitment to diversity and inclusion by redeclaring the city's membership in the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. And whereas in January 2020, Lethbridge City Council expressed their commitment to employment equity by supporting the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Recommendations and Work Plan. Therefore, be it resolved that City Council directs the City Manager to work towards the creation of a municipal workforce broadly reflective of the citizens and communities it serves, And further be it resolved that the city manager report annually on efforts and achievements related to creating a workforce that reflects the community. And further be it resolved that the city manager ensure that an equity, diversity, and inclusion lens is applied to city hiring and employment policies, procedures, and practices. Councillor Crowson?
Thank you, Mayor Chairman. I'm going to sort of explain what this all means and then open for questions. A smart municipality and council will work to give themselves an advantage, especially at this time as we need to, as a corporation and community, get through the pandemic and recession. This resolution would set the aspiration and goal for the city manager to work towards creating a workforce that is broadly reflective of the community in all of its diversity. Research shows that organizations that have such statements move more quickly towards achieving it than ones that don't actually state their aspiration. This is not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. We know that not representing everyone can actually even be dangerous. For example, crash test dummies are made for the average male body, and we have actually found since that is the case, male and female bodies react differently in crashes, and women are actually facing more fatalities in crashes because testing is not being done on an average female crash test dummy. And because most of the engineers were men, this was missed, and it has actually created a danger for women. We know that having the female perspective, half the world, can actually create a better workforce. And this is just one scenario. This is just one area of diversity. Diversity and different perspectives give us better results. They create new ideas. Research actually shows that greater workplace diversity increases profits and results in better decision making. It will give us the advantage that we as a community need as we move ahead. Reflecting our community will actually better serve our community. This is setting the goal. This would be setting that aspiration. How it's achieved, working towards it, would be under the purview of the city manager. And we start with hiring. We start with that lens that we use to ensure city staff come on in full diversity of our community, and then we work towards that over time. That is what this resolution is proposing, and I will take any questions from my colleagues.
Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to the city manager. Mr. Manager, I'm just reading the very last further be it resolved that the city manager ensure that an equity, diversity, and inclusion lens is applied to city hiring and employment policies, procedures, and practices. Can you explain to me what you propose to do and what that will look like, and if you can achieve that?
Thanks, Councillor Morrow, and I would say that yes, we can achieve that, and there has been some good work done here over the past 12 to 18 months. I would ask Mr. Elliott to expand on if he feels it would be helpful. But I think what that work also indicates is that there has been some progress made, and not surprising this area. I think these comments are pretty standard, but that more work needs to be done, and that's clear. And we'll probably be saying that not for lack of effort for some time into the future. This is one of those issues that we need to continue to work on. I can't tell you exactly what that lens would look like, but applying a diversity lens or a gender lens as one small subset of that to the types of things that Councillor Crowson has included in the resolution are now pretty standard practices. And so, yes, I'm confident that we can implement that, and I do think it will help us continue to move this work forward.
Acting Mayor Higgin.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. And just further to that, for Mr. City Manager, I think in being inclusive and diverse, of course, is utmost importance within our community. And I just wanted to make sure that from a hiring standpoint, that we're using these goals to become more diverse and inclusive. But it still comes down to that we are with having this in mind, we are still selecting the I guess, in lack of better words, the best person for the job. Is that correct?
Yes, I think what we're, what this will cause us to do, and again, I need to acknowledge the work that's gone on here by the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group, and others, and I can't speak to what occurred prior to that, but this is more about setting the conditions for diversity and inclusion to be realized. And what I mean by that is, it's too late when you try and it's if you look at this through a hiring lens, or you look at hiring searches, competitions, it's often too late at that point in the time for some individuals of diverse groups to really be competitive, and we know that, and we've seen that over time. And so what we're talking about here ideally is taking steps early on in the careers of people that join the city, to ensure that they're developed and we're aware of any barriers that might exist to achieving a more diverse and inclusive workspace. So it's more of a long-term preventative's the wrong word. It's actually an enabling approach. It's less about targets in the hiring process. And so I think, I'm sure we've all seen examples of how workplaces take this long-term approach and help equip people who might otherwise face barriers because of their background, gender, race, etc., to enable them to more easily belong to an organization and seek a career path that they desire and deserve. So it's more around initiatives in that sense, and less about quotas, as an example.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. Is I know that yourself and your team look for obviously the most qualified person, but giving that opportunity is extremely important, in helping any individual through the process so that they can put their best foot forward. I appreciate that, and thank you very much for that explanation.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from council? Okay, no further questions. We'll move on to debate. Councillor Crowson?
I will close. Thank you, Mayor Spearman.
Okay, any debate? Councillor Miyashiro?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and thank you, Councillor Crowson, for bringing this forward. I will fully support this initiative and this resolution. I think all the things that she said and that City Manager Dalton said to create a more equitable and diverse hiring practices is something that we need to do in Lethbridge. And furthermore, I know that there's some initiatives being undertaken to look at, after the people are hired, to create a workforce with the City of Lethbridge that is supported, in that pockets of discrimination and harassment and misogynistic practices, I think, will be addressed at some point. And I'm really happy to hear that this is a really good starting point.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kaufman?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you as well, Councillor Crowson, for bringing this motion forward. I too will support it. Members of council may recall last term we had Suzanne Dorge come from Cowie, the Citizen for All Women initiative from the City of Ottawa. And we did some work on diversity and inclusion with council as a whole. I know that she addressed the organization as well. Cowie has worked with the City of Ottawa for quite some time. And they actually have all of the tools in place. I have forwarded a copy of some of the tools that are available that City of Ottawa uses to the city manager and to Mr. Elliott, but I know that our own diversity task force is working on this as well. It can only strengthen an organization. It only brings better results because we have a much broader, a much more diverse and a much more inclusive conversation about the policies. And anything that will strengthen us can only make us better. So I will support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I'd like to thank Councillor Crowson for bringing it forward. About 10 years ago, Council did push for inclusion and diversity training within our current workforce. And I know that work has been ongoing. To me, this is a further step, an important step. I like the the phrase, I'm trying to find it, a municipal workforce that is broadly reflective of the citizens and the community it serves. I think that's very important to folks. So when they come into City Hall, they feel represented, they feel welcomed. And so I'd be fully supportive of this. And thank you, Councillor Crowson.
I too will support this resolution. I think it's something that will provide more accountability, and I'm hopeful that we'll see more results in terms of hiring a more diverse workforce. I know we've made some progress in over the last few years, but certainly this will, having regular reports to council, updates on how we're progressing, will certainly make the information more available both to council and the public. So for those reasons, I too will support this resolution. Councillor, did Councillor Carlson speak? Councillor Carlson. Oh, yeah, okay. Anybody else? I'll ask Councillor Crowson to close.
Thank you. Thank you all for your debate. There's an old document that used to hang in classrooms during the Second World War called the Canadians' Creed. And while some parts of it are outdated, there is a phrase that always sticks with me, that the government must be of the people, by the people, and for the people. And the corporation of the City of Lethbridge should reflect that as well, and that this is what this is aiming towards. We are the government, and we are the corporation of the municipality of the City of Lethbridge. It is important that we reflect this community and that we work towards making sure our workforce is inclusive and diverse. With that, I will call the question.
Okay, question has been called. All in favor? Are any opposed? I believe that's unanimous. I'm sponsoring the next resolution. Deputy Mayor Miyashiro, are you able to read it?
I'll take the chair. Yeah, I'll take the chair.
Okay, thank you.
We have item 6.3, official business, coal policy consultations and collaboration. Moved by Mayor Spearman. Whereas the Minister of Energy has announced that coal policy consultation will soon begin, and whereas Lethbridge City Council passed a resolution on February 9th, 2021, expressing concerns, and the Mayor has communicated those concerns to the Premier, the Minister of Energy, the Minister of the Environment, and local MLAs, and whereas other Alberta municipalities are passing similar resolutions, therefore be it resolved that the Mayor have a discussion with the Mayor of the Town of High River about collaborating on a resolution to be proposed to the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association, and further be resolved that City Council authorize discussions on possible collaboration with municipalities who share the concerns approved and communicated by Lethbridge City Council. Mayor Spearman.
Thank you. We have previously passed the two resolutions, one to intervene in the hearing for the project where the hearings concluded in January. I forget the name of that. I think it's the Bent Mountain project. And more recently, we expressed, we wrote the resolution that we passed on February the 9th, expressing the concerns specifically with water, but also with other issues, ensuring that there are enough funds available for reclamation and additional issues. So questions were raised at that time. Would there be a resolution brought to AUMA? And this resolution basically follows up. Have been a couple of meetings since. One last week with the mayors and rees of southwestern Alberta, and the Minister of Energy actually addressed the meeting, said that these consultations would be taking place. But at this point, there hasn't been a collective group that has undertaken an initiative, and the thought was that the AUMA might be the appropriate organization. So if it's the wish of council, I can consult with the Mayor of High River, who was the first community to express concerns about the coal initiatives. And if he's willing to sponsor, we could second his resolution as is required in order to submit resolutions to AUMA. So for those reasons, this resolution is before you today. if we wish to collaborate on a resolution that could go to the AUMA, and this just authorizes me to have those discussions.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. There's no one in line for debate or questions. Debate. Did you want to open debate?
I think this just follows through. I think our concerns remain, and this way we can bring a provincial body representing municipalities on board as well.
Thank you. I will support this resolution. Any other debate? I see none. Mayor Spearman, to close.
This follows up on discussion from council and just following through. So I would ask council to support this resolution.
Okay, thank you very much. Call the question. Any opposed? No, any opposed? There are none. That passes unanimously.
Thank you. And then move on to 6.4. I have a resolution from Councillor Kaufman, tax relief for vacant lots. Whereas in the summer of 2020, the Recovery Lethbridge Committee of Lethbridge City Council asked Build Lethbridge to identify issues of financial concern and opportunity related to the dramatic reduction in housing starts due to the COVID-19 pandemic and Alberta's economic instability. And whereas Build Lethbridge has requested that a 50% tax relief on vacant single-family residential lots and vacant multifamily residential lots would support this industry through the current economic instability. And whereas having two residential subclasses would assist developers and builders with the increased carrying costs from the unusually high lot inventory stemmed from a dramatic reduction in housing starts due to the COVID-19 pandemic and Alberta's economic instability. And whereas at the February 24th, 2021 Economic Standing Policy Committee, the City Manager provided options for City Council to address this request. Therefore, be it resolved that City Council instruct the City Manager to bring forward the following proposed bylaw amendment to Bylaw 6254 to add a third and fourth subclass, vacant single-family residential lots, and vacant multifamily lots. And further be it resolved that City Council consider reducing the property tax mill rate for these subclasses by 50%, but not exceeding the 5-to-1 ratio between the highest non-residential rate as compared to the lowest residential rate when the tax rates are set in May. And further be it resolved that the City Manager present City Council with options to fund the reduction prior to the mill rate being set in May. And further be it resolved that City Council consider providing this reduced mill rate for future tax rate bylaw consideration for a period of 3 years. And further be it resolved that no later than September the 30th of each year, the City Manager presents City Council with annual statistics on these subclasses, including, but not limited to, the number of lots within these subclasses and the number of lots that have been assessed and taxed multiple years under these subclasses. And further be it resolved that the City Manager present this before amendment in time for the current tax season. Councillor Kaufman.
Say before May.
Oh,
thank
before
you.
May? Before May. Present this event, amendment before May in time for the
Thank
current tax season?
Yeah. So if you could actually, maybe just as members of council can consider this, the third operative clause, the one that says further be resolved, the City Manager presents City Council with options to fund the reduction. Really, this last operative clause should follow that, although it's in there. You could disregard the last one altogether if you really want, because the instruction is in there. He has to come back prior to May if this passes. So that's what that operative clause refers to, is the instruction about coming back with options.
Okay, is your recommendation as the mover just to remove the last clause?
yes, I'm actually okay with the last clause being done because the city manager would have to come back prior to the mill rates being set anyway.
Okay. So it can be removed. Do we need a seconder, or can the mover amend his own resolution in this case?
Mover can amend as long as there's no opposition, then it would have to be a full amendment as a vote.
Okay. So is there any opposition to removing the last sentence? I see none, so we will do that. Thank you. Okay. Are there any questions? Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, Councillor Kaufman, for bringing it forward out of committee. Just a couple questions. The resolution refers several times to dramatic decrease in housing starts. Do we have those numbers?
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. I believe that information was actually provided to the Recovery Lethbridge Committee as part of Bill's briefing document. I don't have that in front of me, no. That language comes from that presentation that Bill provided, as well as the presentation that Bill provided to the Economic Standing Policy Committee back in February.
Thank you. Through your worship to city manager and designate, I know we publish those stats. Do we have that information?
I'm not sure, Mr. Hawkins or Mr. Bazunas, if you have access to those or not.
We do. We track those stats. I'll see if I can get some current numbers in terms of year-over-year results or housing starts. Let me just check with my staff.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins, for that. I can wait for that answer. Your worship, I've got another question I could ask while waiting. Through you to the city manager, council recently, last year, approved some economic policies to provide opportunities for folks to apply for relief in certain circumstances on a case-by-case basis. One of my concerns is one size does not necessarily fit all. One developer or builder may have seen dramatic increases. Another one could have seen dramatic increases. Without going case by case, I don't know. So under those policies that council approved, is there an ability for individual builders, developers, etc., to approach council on a case by case basis?
Councillor Carlson, do you mean is there an opportunity for them to apply for those incentives, or I'm just want to make sure I understand the question?
Yes, and I'm sorry I didn't pull up the policies we passed as part of Recovery Lethbridge. We put forward a suite of things saying that if people were experiencing issues, here was the process they needed to go forward through, and it would come to council on a case-by-case basis. Is there anything in that an individual builder or developer could use rather than a one-size-fits-all, whether you're actually struggling or not?
Apart from, and I'll ask Ms. Pinkson I think she's ready to jump in, apart from the incentive programs, which may apply to developers who are looking to build more so in downtown, I would say, and the tax deferral policy, which I think is what you might be referring to.
Thank you.
And I don't think either one of those would necessarily apply, but I'll defer to Ms. Pinkson.
Mayor Spearman through to Councillor Carlson. So when Bill brought this information forward to Economic, we talked about different options, and one of the options was that individual developers could come to council similar to the tax cancellation request that was brought forward as a submission today on an individual basis, and if council would feel that it was equitable to do so, then that could be approved on an individual basis.
Okay, thank you for that.
That would be an alternative to the motion today, Ms. Pinkson, is that right? That would be a different approach?
That's correct. This would be applying it to all of vacant lots within the city of Lethbridge. If council wanted a different option in terms of each developer would come forward to council to request a tax cancellation.
Excellent. Thank you. I have further questions, Your Worship, but I can hop out.
Okay, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wonder if someone can just explain from my brain exactly what the scenario is for home builders right now, why this is important for them, and how it creates a little better. You can kind of go through a scenario if that's possible. Can someone kind of help me just understand what they're asking for and how this is going to go forward?
I'll ask Mr. Councillor Kaufman to do that as the mover.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, Councillor Campbell, for the question. Again, I believe that Ms. Mearns addressed this during the economic SPC back on the 24th. The way the situation is right now, when a developer buys a lot, we'll deal with this as lots as opposed to an entire section that they're trying to develop. And services are provided to those lots. The moment the services are provided, the lot is actually taxed at the rate as if there was a house on the property. Now, it is assessed as being a vacant lot, absolutely, so you're not paying for a mythical house. However, what you're being assessed for is the fact that it's a service lot, and that is what increases the value over an unserviced lot. When we asked Build back in the Recovery Lethbridge days last summer, to bring forward ideas that would help spur economic activity or help the developers and the builders through this period of COVID, this was one of the ideas that came forward because of all of the vacant lots are being held or being assessed at the residential rate. And what is being proposed is a subclass of vacant lots that are actually serviced and ready for building but are not assessed at the same rate as a residential property. Does that clarify the logic?
Yeah, I appreciate just kind of going it. I needed to explain a little bit in my brain, so I appreciate that. I guess the question, maybe someone from management can answer this, is 50% reduction, is that equitable to us?
That's a question for council, Councillor Campbell. That's difficult for us to say.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carlson, you said you had more questions, and we're waiting for a response also from Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Question, and I think our staff covered this in the economic, but I did ask a follow-up question there that I think said they could look into. At that time, we heard of other communities that do have these different subclasses, but they do it the opposite. They assess them at a higher value, or a higher tax rate in order to spur development and to incentivize folks to develop and not over purchase and under build, so to speak. Did we find any communities that do it the opposite way, the way Councillor Kaufman is proposing here, that give tax breaks for vacant lots? I couldn't find any in my research, but I was hoping somebody more connected than I could have.
Mr. Hawkins, I'm not sure if do we have that information?
No, I don't believe we do have that specific information.
Okay, then I'll just ask, am I correct though that municipalities we looked at actually have a tax class that does the opposite of what this is intending?
I think that is true, that there are instances where that's the case. I guess back to the original requests of Build and others in the community about what could council do to assist in stimulus in terms of creating better conditions for economic recovery. It would not be our view that this administratively that this is the right tool to do that, but again, it is a suggestion that only council can can answer themselves at this point. We have not observed that this kind of tax policy would in fact do what the committee last year and council was looking for this year, is to stimulate activity. I think there are more factors at play that will drive additional housing starts than this particular issue itself. But again, this is up. The ask has been made. It's up to council to vote on this.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. I had another question from Ms. Pinkson, but she's got her hand up. I don't know if she was going to answer my previous question.
Yes, Councillor Carlson. So we did not find any municipalities and instances where they lowered the mill rate for specific vacant lots. There are a few municipalities that that have a vacant lot rate, but none that it's lower.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Pinkson. The impact on residential or other commercial taxes, if this was passed and a decrease, because we've already set our budget, so it has to be found somewhere, either dipping into reserves or adding it to the tax roll of the rest of the community. Can you tell me what that impact would be?
So the resolution has been changed since I originally reviewed it. So I'm just needing some clarification, which I think will help answer your question, Councillor Carlson. If this, based on what is being recommended here in terms of creating subclasses for vacant lots and providing a reduction to those vacant lots of 50%, assuming that doesn't exceed the 5-to-1 ratio that's required under the MGA, in that instance, the reduction would be a reallocation to the other existing classes within that category. So I'm just a little bit concerned about and requiring some clarification of the paragraph that talks about the city manager present city council with options to fund the reduction prior to the mill rate being set, because that would be treated more as a grant potentially opportunity, funding from a reserve or some other funding source. That that paragraph is a bit conflicting with the option that's presented above. So if council wanted to provide to developers a grant related to their property taxes, then we would need to, I think that would be a separate resolution from what's being proposed here. So I'm not sure if we could, maybe just Councillor Kaufman needs to clarify what the intent was, but what's provided above would be that the developers would receive a reduced tax amount on their property tax bill based on setting mill rates at 50% of single family residents. And but the amount of revenue that's required remains the same. And so that reduction would be redistributed to the other, for example, single family residences to cover the taxes that is being provided as a reduction to the developers. And that is very different than providing a funding source to provide a grant to developers to reduce their property taxes. So they're actually two different kind of options to consider.
And thank you for that, Ms. Pinkson. And that amount, do we have a ballpark? Because the way I read it, it is saying reduce Group A's taxes by X and increase Group B's taxes, basically the rest of us, by Y. Do we have an idea how much that's going to be? We've been trying to get to a zero, and I'm a bit concerned.
So that was
zero.
Sorry, Councillor Carlson. So that was approximately about $500,000, and that was about a 0.25% impact.
And that can only be applied to residential? Is that what you were saying, because it has to be in that same tax class?
Well, typically
it
it would be within the same category of single family. If council wanted to redistribute that throughout all of the taxes, we would just need direction in terms of how council wanted to approach that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. There are other questions, Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask some questions, and I'm going to just plead with the people that are going to answer to just try and keep it simple, because the more I'm listening, the more complicated this is getting. So just a couple questions. When we talk about a developer, and I'll address my question to Councillor Kaufman and also to our city treasurer. When we talk about, and here I see the word, read the word developer, who are we talking about?
Thank you, Councillor Morrow. I believe that we are talking about the people that have actually invested resources, financial and human, into creating subdivisions. And as we moved through COVID, as we moved into COVID, and as we move through COVID, hopefully coming out of COVID this year, what we've created is there's a backlog of lots, and there's a desire on the part of the development community, those that have created subdivisions, to actually address those vacant lots in a different manner than the way we currently do through the tax process. Does that clarify it?
So you're you're saying not only the builders group that moves into, and I'll use where I live in the crossings, there's usually 2 or 3 builders that have to buy 10, 12 lots to buy into to develop the neighborhood. What about someone that is not part of the builders group in a new development, but might possibly have 2 or 3 lots scattered throughout the community? Are they included in this as well?
Yeah, thank you, Morrow. Your question was, what is a developer? To this question, this is actually a subclass that we apply to all vacant service lots in the city, because subclasses deal with the entirety of the community. So we wouldn't just be necessarily addressing, well, we wouldn't be just addressing developers in new subdivisions, we would be addressing vacant service lots in the city.
So if I personally own a lot that I might want to build a house on in a year or 2, or as soon as I can, this would include me as well?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and it's only in areas where the neighborhood has been serviced?
It is only applying to service land. And Ms. Pinkson, if I've strayed in my response anywhere, please correct me.
Okay, just so Ms. Pinkson, I need some clarification. So if I'm going to be, and again, I'm just going to use the crossings. If I'm one of the home builders in the crossings, and at the time when I purchased, there were 3 home builders, part of the home builders group, and nobody else. Now I think there's 2, so they own the lots that are still undeveloped. Do those do they, when they purchase, do they purchase at a discounted cost right from the start? When they buy their land, when they buy their lots, when they buy their 10 or 12 lots, do they not purchase them less than anybody else that would come in off the street that happens to get their name drawn in the lot draw?
Maybe I'll jump in. If you're talking about, we can only really speak, Councillor Morrow, to the real estate and land department and city-owned development, and yes, we often do offer discounts at the outset for lots to service lots to the builder group as an incentive, and to build show homes, and as an incentive for actually committing to build single family and multifamily homes in our neighborhoods. It is our assumption that private developers, the Melcors, the Daytonas, and Avonlees, do exactly the same thing with respect to their new neighborhoods as well.
Okay, my final question for now, if I may. How many developers are there, and how many people would this affect?
Um, because it would apply in the context of setting a mill rate and classifying vacant lots across the community on an equitable basis. There'll be dozens and dozens of people that this would apply to. Individual vacant lot owners, builders who own vacant lots, as well as the original developer who serviced the lot and has yet to sell the lots to potential home builders or home buyers. So it could be dozens and dozens of people that are impacted or benefit from this from a tax perspective.
So how many developers then? Are we talking just the city of Lethbridge, or are we talking the ones that you mentioned as well?
No, all the developers.
All developers.
Yeah. So we've got 7 or 8 active developers currently in the community, and then several dozen homeowners as well, or home builders.
And if I may, I'd like to ask that same question to Councillor Kaufman, if you may. If you don't mind answering that, please. That same question about how many developers, and you might know a little bit.
Thank you, Councillor Moreau. Again, by creation of the subclasses, it's applied equitably across the entire city. So I don't know how many that would encapsulate, but as you said in your example, you could own a vacant service lot, and that subclass would apply to you as well. In terms of the developers, it would be those who are sorry to put it in the answer, it would be those who are developing. I don't have a firm number for you. Just think of our subdivisions that are currently under construction. If you can picture that on a map, it would be developers, or it would be any vacant, certainly any vacant lot, vacant service lot within any of those subdivisions where it would apply. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I've hopped out. I'll hop back in for other questions. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Acting Mayor Hagan.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. A question I have, I'm not sure who can answer this, but I brought up in a conversation before regarding the amount of time it takes to start a build on a property, for example, after the purchase of a lot. I know when I was growing up, and it takes it back, and I'll date myself a little while, my family had purchased a lot, and construction needed to be started on that lot in the time that we purchased it within 90 days. Because they wanted to incentivize, they wanted to get that particular neighborhood built, and so they offered that. Do we have anything around that when someone purchases a lot? Can it sit vacant for 10 years, 15 years, or does someone have to start construction on the lot within a set period of time?
Again, I can help answer that. Typically, developers, including the real estate and land department, have timeframes established for the time at which they sell a lot, transfer ownership to either a home builder or an individual buyer, a homeowner, and it's usually around 2 years to actually start digging a basement and developing a home. That's sort of the rule of thumb, and I suspect that applies similarly with the other private land developers as well. That's sort of been the traditional benchmark. I would suggest that those rules, those restrictions are probably a lot less, not necessarily enforced as rigorously right now, just given the current economic climate. But typically the developer is not interested in over-servicing nor overselling and selling to homeowners or home builders that are going to be slow to actually put up a house, because they want to see that neighborhood built out, and again, cash flow is dependent on the actual sale itself and construction and other things as well. So
it's just been practice over the time that it could be up to a couple of years, but we don't actually have anything stating that you must before a certain time.
We have rules with respect to certain development permits, but typically home construction, like it's tied to the issuance of a permit. So But when we're talking vacant land, if an applicant hasn't actually applied for a development permit or a building permit, there is no, it's up to the developer to put those restrictions in place. We have timelines associated with the point at which a development permit expires, but again, and then you have to reapply. But it is not necessarily, it's not about actually demanding or making it mandatory to actually build. It's just a time frame associated with the permits.
My second question, if I could, and sorry, my apologies if this has already been asked and I missed it, but real estate and land development, do we ourselves pay yearly? Because there's obviously it's land that we've kept for ourselves, or I'm saying ourselves being the corporation. Is that something that is we pay on that yearly, as do the developers? So we take that amount, if it's $1,000 for an unserviced lot or whatever, we actually charge ourselves for that on a yearly basis, similar to that of the other builders and developers?
Yeah, I'll pass that one to Haley, but I believe we do. Yeah, there is an equivalent amount paid for city-owned development land to taxes, even though we're a municipal entity. Haley?
Yeah, so it's a property tax in lieu, which is a contribution to the general fund, which reduces our overall net kind of property tax requirement revenue generation. So it's a contribution that reduces our property tax requirements collected from everyone else.
And that is self-funded by that department. It is not through taxation. I mean, I guess
it's a contribution from RELD to the general fund.
Oh, so they do contribute each year. All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my question is to the mover, first of all. I like the idea of it in spirit, but help me get my head around that we're not picking winners and losers. And when I say losers, I'm talking about, let's say there's vacant commercial buildings throughout the city that have been affected by COVID and all that. Help me get my head around why we should pick developers versus everyone else.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Parker. First of all, this is a request coming forward from Build, and a request based on us asking what we can do to help or support. So there's been no conversation about commercial properties. That's why it's absent from this motion. Certainly, if you want to make a motion to add to it, or an amendment to it, you're absolutely welcome and encouraged to do that. This is about addressing the needs of the residential building sector within our community. That's why there's no mention to any vacant commercial property, whether it's serviced and vacant or vacant buildings.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate it. I know you're just bringing this forward on behalf of what was requested a few months back. My question is to the city solicitor. By doing this, we wouldn't be challenged in that we're picking one class of land over another class in regards to, could we be challenged on this at all, Mr. City Solicitor?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. The MGA provides that there's certain categories of land that you're legally allowed to create classes for, subclasses. The big distinction that we're all familiar with is non-residential versus residential. This is just an extension of that, and why it's not a problematic distinction is because you're applying it to all parcels that have the same characteristics. This wouldn't just apply to developers' vacant lands. It would apply to, as we've already established and you've discussed, any vacant land. So you're treating all land that's similarly situated similarly. So you would be okay that way from a legal point of view.
Thank you, and I appreciate the answers. And my last question, Mr. Mayor, and then I'm done. I don't know if Mr. Hawkins or someone from Lethbridge Land can answer this question. Obviously, the housing market was actually surprisingly very strong last year in Lethbridge and Southern Alberta. Have you heard, or is there a huge uptick on now undeveloped land in regards to service lots now being built on? Is the permits now being increased because there's possibly a shortage due to all the current pre-sale houses?
Yeah, we don't have great numbers for 2021 just yet. I do have some numbers I can speak to if you want to give me a sec here. Just in terms of housing, so the question was asked about housing starts. The year-over-year numbers. So this is actual construction, actual houses that were built 2019 versus 2020 year over year. So in 2019, we had, of all unit types, like everything, single family, multifamily units, condos, duplexes, the whole shoot match, 702 housing starts in 2019, and that dropped significantly to 442 last year, 2020. And we've had, believe it or not, 67 housing starts, again, of all types, to date in 2021. So we're actually tracking quite well, because that number is just reflects the first 2 months of this year. So the indication is that the housing market is rebounding, but we won't know for sure till later in the year. Now, what this doesn't really tell you, though, is, but I think the research was done in the context of this ask, is what is the inventory of vacant service land that's out there right now, and that's a different, that's a different. Obviously, we got some estimate based on serviced neighborhoods today and what the total unit count was, and then that translated into this $500,000 potential tax redeployment that Bill was asking for. But that is but at least it is true that year over year, 2019 to 2020 was quite a precipitous drop in housing starts. But all indications is that things are definitely trending up in 2021 at this particular point.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the answers, everyone.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Just following up on something Councillor Morrow started asking about that triggered something in my head. This would apply to any vacant lot. I think we're all aware of different neighborhood subdivisions that, even if they've been built out 10, 15, 20 plus years ago, still have vacant lots in them. And so this would apply to anything. If somebody bought a lot, I won't name neighborhoods, in a certain neighborhood and has been sitting on it for 10, 15 years, this would apply to that as well?
Councillor Carlson, it would apply to all vacant lots. There are approximately 700 in the city. And just for your question previously about how many owners, that would be approximately 110 different owners.
Okay, and do we have any idea how long people have, like, some were purchased maybe a year ago? Do we have any idea of the ones that have been just sitting there vacant for 5, 10 years that people invested as an ongoing investment, or to build when they retire, etc.? We don't have a timeline of those, do we?
No, I mean, we would have to, if it's part of the mill rate in the tax bylaw, it would have to apply to all, whether it was there for a year or whether it was there for 10 years. If it's a vacant service lot, in this instance of this example, in terms of the direction in this resolution, it would be a subclass for all vacant lots.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spearman. Thanks everyone for answering those questions. I need a clarification, I think, from Ms. Pinkston. Something she said earlier on was that if this is passed, then any savings realized for vacant lots would have to be added on to property taxes for other properties in those same classes. Can you just clarify that? that's the only way that we can make up for that shortfall, or is that the recommended way to do it?
This is the recommendation that was brought forward from Build, in terms of I think it was Ms. Mern's recommendation that they didn't want each individual owner to be coming forward to request a cancellation or a discount to council. So this is the proposed approach to address the recommendation brought forward by Build in terms of creating a subclass, which would reduce, which would have an impact of approximately $500,000. And that $500,000 would need to be collected from the rest of the residential class. It would be redistributed to the other customers within the single family lots.
And multifamily.
And multifamily. So you would look at the residential, single family residential, and they would have to cover the vacant single family lots that were reduced, that dollar impact. And then you'd look at the multifamily, and the rest of the customers within that class would have to recover the reduced amount for the single or the vacant multifamily lots.
Right. And there's no other way to deal with that shortfall.
So the other options is each individual owner comes forward, requests it to council, or council provides a grant, which could be used to cover the reduction for each individual developer. So there's kind of three options.
Right, but not just developer, builders.
The vacant owners, vacant lot owners.
Right, so there could be 50 of them.
So there's 110 different owners with approximately 700 lots throughout the city that would be impacted by this.
And if they all came, they'd have to prove need as well.
Sorry?
If they all came to council, I'm sure they'd have to prove need for us to approve that. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, Councillor Morrow.
Thanks again, Mr. Mayor. So my question to our city treasurer. So you've said that there's 700 lots. Oh, and by the way, I need to make it clear, I don't own any lots. If it made it sound like I did, I kind of wish I did, but I don't. But let's just say if I was one of those 110 people that owned a lot. So my lot now is serviced and it's zoned for residential. I don't have a house on there, but I'm paying just taxes on the land. Can you give me an average price of what that tax amount would be on serviced residential, no home on that property? Average. Well, less than 1,000, I'm guessing.
I just need to double check here.
And while you're doing that, my next question, which you probably already know, is if this passes, what would that do to my tax amount paid that I would need to pay? Cut in half, I guess.
I believe it's the vacant lot is approximately, like if you take, it would be $1 million. That includes the multifamily ones. I don't have the breakdown right in front of me. Divided by the 700 lots, it's roughly $1,400 per lot. And if
sorry to interrupt. So just to be clear, so what you're saying then, that if I am if I own a lot, and I'm going to pick in the crossings where I live, there's an empty lot. Let's say I own it. I'm paying taxes on it as an empty residential lot. That amount you're saying would be approximately $1,400. Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. If this passes, would that $1,400 amount then I would pay $700?
Right.
And Councillor Kaufman, the resolution is that this be done for 3 years.
Thank you, Councillor Morrow. Yes, again, the proposal coming from Build was that this be put in place for 3 years. If you'll also notice in the motion, and this didn't come from Build, this came from conversations at Recovery Lethbridge, as well as the 3 other conversations we've had with Build on this issue. That's the data collection part that they're be reporting back to City Council on an annual basis about the uptake on these subclasses. The reason being to monitor some of the concerns that one of the previous questioners had about somebody sitting on a lot for 25 years, or a lot perhaps that is unsellable, sitting vacant for a number of years.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions from council? I see none. We'll move on to debate. I'll ask the mover to open.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, members of council, for entertaining this and for your questions. I do need just to correct one piece of information. Build did not ask for a tax shift. Build put forward the options, but did not say shift the tax. That is perhaps one option or one consequence of creating the subclasses, but that actually didn't come from Build. That's a consequence of the processes that we're in. We have to reflect on the fact that we asked Build to provide Recovery Lethbridge and then eventually Economic SPC and now Council for options that would help this industry, which is our largest industry in the city, for options to help them through the current process, the current environment. Options were provided on February 24th and nothing has come forward. And that's why we're here today. I've put forward a motion for a debate and deliberation. The issue of sitting on a lot, when we think of the subdivisions that we have going in this community, I don't know anybody who is buying a large swath of land, investing the money in the infrastructure to develop it, and then choosing to sit on a lot for a savings of $700. It's just an economic reality of what's going on in our community right now. The data collection aspect of this motion is meant to address the very concerns that some of you expressed about people sitting on lots. And again, I don't think anybody's sitting there for the purpose of a saving. Everybody would like to sell the property that I'm certain that they're hanging on to. And if we collect this data, then maybe we can understand where there are opportunities in the future. One of my colleagues keeps referring to the city of St. Albert, who has an increase in the tax rate on vacant land. That option exists. I don't know if now is the time to actually do that. On the issue of the revenue, there are several options. Our default is usually to raise taxes. We can actually look at lowering expenses, and council went through a wonderful exercise back in November around that. We also have reserves, and we do have the ability to draw from reserves if we see that necessity there. Now, if you don't like what you see here, defeat this, but make certain you bring back an option, because we've asked somebody for support. We've asked somebody to provide us with information that we can support, that we can provide assistance in, and we can't just leave people in our community, certainly leave people in our community hanging. I think for the purpose of time and deliberation on this, I will leave it at that and open it to further debate. Thank you, Mr. Spearman.
Any further debate from councillors? Acting Mayor Higgin.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and thank you to the mover for bringing this forward. And I know it's been a discussion for quite some time, and I appreciate you bringing it forward and having this discussion. I agree that there needs to be some support for businesses in our community like this that are struggling through these times. What I struggle with is the fact that that support will fall back on, of course, the rest of the citizens with a tax increase. From what I've heard, I just, for that reason, I hope it does come back with possible other options or something to that matter. But right now, the way that it sits currently, I just cannot support it.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, Councillor Kaufman, for bringing this forward out of committee. I do appreciate it being addressed. Unfortunately, I'm unable to support it this time. The way I read it through amending bylaw 6254, it basically is a one-size-fits-all, and it really doesn't address individual needs or folks who may be experiencing issues or flourishing, as the case may be. Further to what Acting Mayor Higgins said, the way it's proposed in this resolution is to reduce taxes on vacant lots and add those taxes to other residents. And that's something that I cannot support at this time. So I won't be in favor, but thank you for bringing it forward.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you very much to Councillor Kaufman for bringing this forward as well. I do believe we need to address this in a different way. I didn't realize when it first came forward that there's a likelihood that any savings will be passed on to other property owners in the city. I think we need to look at this differently, even if it means having everybody that might be affected come and speak to council on their own behalf, because I don't believe that every single person that owns a vacant lot or every company that owns vacant lots would come before council asking for relief, because we'd have some pretty strict criteria that we'd want to approve any kind of relief for. So unfortunately, I won't be able to support this at this moment.
Do any other members of council wish to speak? Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. I won't add much to what already has been said. I'm 100% behind trying to figure out a way to assist the industry with build. This is not the way to go at this time for all of the reasons that previous colleagues have stated. But to Councillor Kaufman's point, let's figure something else out and come back for another offer. I can't support this. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. I think time is short. Tax bills are going out soon. It's really a very difficult choice, and I think we committed to all taxpayers there would be no tax increases when we said that it would be 0, 0, 0. So the only other option would be to fund this through a grant. And where that funds would come from, we haven't yet determined. So at this time, I can't support the resolution, but I respect the effort to address the concerns of build. Anybody else? I will ask Councillor Kaufman to close.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you again to my colleagues for your consideration and the questions, the deliberation, and debate on the matter. Call the question.
Question has been called. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councillor Crowson.
Opposed.
Councillor Morrow.
Opposed.
Councillor Parker.
Opposed.
Acting Mayor Higgin.
Opposed this time.
Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Opposed.
Mayor Spearman.
Opposed.
Councillor Campbell.
Opposed.
Councillor Carlson.
Opposed.
Councillor Kaufman.
In favor.
1 to 8, that is lost.
Thank you. I now have an official business resolution from Councillor Campbell. Bylaw 6265, Municipal Development Plan Public Hearings. Whereas the 2021 Council calendar has scheduled public hearings for Bylaw 6265, Municipal Development Plan for March 1 to March 5th, starting at 4 p.m. And whereas the City of Lethbridge has made an error in advertising for the public hearings, and whereas there is a need to reschedule the public hearings because of the error, and whereas City Council is desirous of scheduling a final public hearing after amendments have been made from the first set of public hearings, therefore be it resolved that the 2021 Council and Committee meeting calendar be amended by deleting the March 1 to March 5th public hearings for Bylaw 6265, Municipal Development Plan, and further that the 2021 Municipal council and committee meeting calendar be amended by adding public hearings for Bylaw 6265, Municipal Development Plan on March 29th, March 30th, March 31st, and April 1st, and June 1st, 2021, all starting at 4 p.m. Councillor Campbell?
Thank you, Your Worship. Accidents happen, mistakes happen. This happened, and then we have to fix it. And I think everything that was explained in the resolution pretty much says it all. We have to be accountable for our mistakes, and we're making up for that. Unless there's any other questions, I'll leave it at that.
Can I query the June 1st date on that resolution?
Yes? Go ahead, Councillor Croson.
Can the resolution be put up? Because I thought it was March and then jumped to June.
There is an additional date in June. So March 29th, 30th, March 31st, April 1st, and June the 1st, 2021, all starting at 4 p.m.
Can you just confirm for me what the June 1st is for?
Councillor Croson, it's Bonnie. We had heard at the MDP hearing that council wanted a second public hearing, and we thought we'd just work that in to this OBR.
Okay, so that means we will not be passing this at any time prior to June 1st, which means that we would have to not talk to anyone about this from March till June?
From April the 1st until June the 1st. Yeah, for 2 months.
That, like the June 1st would be when amendments have been brought forward, and maybe I can get Director Hawkins to speak to this more detailed than me.
I think the thinking was that after the initial week in late March, that there'd be an expectation that council would want to consider official business resolutions to make and propose amendments. So it would allow some time between that week of hearings on the ending on April 1st for that consideration to occur individually, and potentially even bring those OBRs back to a regular meeting of council, either in not likely in April, but in May as a directional resolutions, and then the document would be amended and brought forward on June 1st for one last visit at a public hearing, considering those amendments would have been dealt with at a regular meeting of council in May. So that's the thinking in terms of staggering the dates. So, but you're right, from a statutory perspective, when you've each day that you've adjourned the meeting and you'd just be adjourning on April 1st, you shouldn't be receiving any additional representations from the public or having conversations among yourselves. You should be just thinking in terms of what changes might you want to propose and bring those to a regular meeting of council for debate prior to that last hearing date in June. So that's the theory. Okay. It's also in recognition that right in the middle of all this is the CIP budget deliberations too. We're just being sensitive to the amount of the other commitments the council already has in their calendar.
I appreciate that. I think you just have a lot of a long time for us to remember not to talk about something when you are a group of 9 people who talk about everything.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Thank you. So we couldn't move this to finalize this on May the 4th? I'm just saying, like, if council,
yeah,
Mr. Hawkins, I'm just saying, if council feels strongly enough to make some changes to what's presented in the MDP, and they want to bring OBs forward to make those changes, we have enough time now that we can be reading through the MDP draft and coming up with those possible changes now.
That's
we have lots of time right now before we actually have those deliberations. I'm just like Councillor Coaston, I'm a little concerned with the 2-month lag between the last day of the public hearing and when we actually want to deliberate on it.
that again, just to speak to that, that last date is entirely up to council to choose.
Right.
There was administration heard a desire to have another date established for that purpose, so to post amendments, post OBRs. And so if council wants to try to get this, have that hearing on May 4th, that's entirely up to them. There's no, I don't think, Bonnie, that there's any advertising issues, because what we would do is we would, based on the decision today, we would get out the proper notices in terms of those dates and do
right.
the appropriate advertising. So I should just make sure that there's no issue.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it just makes more sense. Get it done before the CIP week and get it out, get it done. So that's all I have to say.
Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. And thank you, Councillor Crowson, for highlighting this, because I thought it was a typo myself. I'm just wondering, and maybe through yourself, your worship, to probably the city clerk, is probably the one, or the city solicitor. Legislative requirements. We have to have a public hearing on this bylaw, but only required to have one, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there any thought about the possibility of March 29th, 30th, 31st, and April 1st being called public meetings, where we have all the presentations, we have all the discussion and the back and forth, and then the actual public hearing is held on June 1st or whatever date council wants, and we enter all of the information gathered as attachments, and they can form part of the public hearing. It's basically a workaround so we can actually have the dates and have the public meetings where we have the good discussions and back and forth, but then we can still discuss it for another 2 months, and then have the public hearing. Does that make sense to anyone, or is that a possibility? Or am I inventing things?
It's Brian here. I think that's an interesting suggestion. Ideally, if we were crafting a process along those lines, I would have recommended that we do that prior to first reading, and then have the first reading, have your mandatory public hearing, and then deal with the things afterwards. The issue with the public hearing is that when you get to the public hearing, the public has the right to be aware of anything that council is considering in that. And so what has been the gray area that we've all been trying to figure out is not the material that a member of the public comes and submits to council. That becomes part of the record and would be accessible to other people. But the kind of conversations that as politicians you do when you engage with your stakeholders, with constituents, and that you might hear that isn't captured or recorded in the public record. And so we could deal with that if all of that was done, and then that was put in, you got the public meetings out of the way, then you came up with a first reading bylaw, let the public read it, comment on it, come to the public hearing, and then you could use any of that feedback for any of your OBRs before second reading at that time. At this point, I'm not sure that it would solve the problem that you're hoping it would, because the bylaw already has first reading.
Okay, thank you. Just an attempt.
Okay, Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. The two JCs are obviously channeling the same energy and thought, because I had exactly the same thought about non-statutory information. Now, if I heard you correctly, Mr. Solicitor, if we were to gather and capture information from public meeting, whatever we want to call it, and include that as part of a package for a public hearing, available for the public to see, available for the public to read, and still have the public hearing on June the 1st, we are meeting the legislative requirement. Let me stop and ask that first. We are meeting the legislative requirement, correct?
Currently?
Currently we're meeting the legislative requirement if we have a meeting on June 1st. If we have a public hearing on June 1st, we're meeting the legislative requirement.
Well, let me approach this in a different way, and if I understand what the concern is, maybe it's a non-issue in this sense. The June 1st date is being reserved for a public hearing, but listening to Director Hawkins, it's anticipated really only to be focused on any OBRs or changes that council makes after the first set of public hearings. So when that first set of public hearings, or the one extended public hearing, ends, there's a council debate. The bylaw will be amended. You could have, if you wanted second reading, or you could table second reading, and at that time advertise the June 1st date, and in the in-between period, you would be able to talk to people. The idea would be that you shouldn't talk to anyone once it's been amended and then the new public hearing is advertised. So I don't view the requirement or the risk to the integrity of the public hearing as requiring silence from March 29th to June 1st. If we're all clear and structure it with that understanding, and that's consistent with what I heard Director Hawkins say as well.
Okay, thank you. So the challenge for the elected body is, if we entertain public hearings then the week of the 29th of March, and we hear information for which we need clarification, if we put forward motions to be debated or deliberated at a regular meeting of council in May, for example, do we not incur, and I recognize asking a solicitor about risk publicly is a problem, but do we not incur greater risk of going sideways on our statutory requirements if we end up debating things that we shouldn't be deliberating or debating at a public meeting on amendments, or the risk of not being able to actually check back in with community on how the amendments have maybe changed or impacted things? I think this is where council is struggling, is if we're going to have the public hearings for a week ending April 1st, and we have 2 months of no community contact, we're sort of operating in a bit of a vacuum.
Maybe I can help, Councillor Kaufman. It is administration's view that this document, as it's currently tabled at first reading, is yours.
Yes.
And all of that public meeting and input, at least from an administrative perspective, is done. The hearing process, and the reason it's lengthy is because of the depth and complexity of the document, is your opportunity to take representations and difference of opinion, because there is clearly a difference of opinion in terms of some of the policies we've crafted, because it's a compromise. We've heard all of these stakeholders, we've engaged all of these different voices, and we've tried to translate that based on the direction we've received from council previously and all of that input. But now it's that hearing process that is your opportunity as the decision makers to delve in and ask questions and ultimately go away with whatever potential changes you see fit in that contest. It's very transparent then. The minutes and the meetings, or the hearing process, will be clearly well documented in terms of what transpired. And and I suspect that you're going to want to make changes, and that's absolutely appropriate. But but you own it. It is in terms of transparency, in terms of statutory obligation. You need to make the decision then based on those representations you heard during the statutory hearing. So there's no question it would be easier to avoid any impropriety or to violate due process by shortening up the period at which the hearing is done and you've got to actually debate and second and third reading. But again, having debate in a public meeting, at a regular meeting of council, in terms of directing administration to make changes prior to second and third reading is absolutely appropriate and is contemplated by the MGA. So let's just talk hypothetically. You'd finish up on April 1st with the public hearing, that initial public hearings. You come as early as, say, April either 6th or the 20th with a number of suggested OBRs, again directing us to go away and amend the document, and then you could easily at that point deal with the amendments as early as May 4th. The only issue then, though, is if you know that you're going to want to open it up to the public for one more hearing, you need to do that now in order to establish and notify that public correctly. If you choose, though, not to worry about that last hearing date, and do as the solicitor is suggesting, is notify the public again prior to second and third reading that you want another hearing, that's appropriate as well. So I think given where we're at in the process, the fact that this is your document, again, you create policy based on public input. Well, that opportunity in terms of the informal or the lead up is already done, and now you need to do that in the context of a rigid formal statutory process. That's what we're recommending. It's at that point. And again, then the MGA governs. It dictates what your behavior is once you're at that stage in the process.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to say the June 1st public hearing recognizes what Council was saying about the opportunity for one more public hearing. Absolutely, I don't think that should go. And perhaps it's for our colleagues or my colleagues to consider right now whether April 1st is too long a lag, and if we're prepared to actually do some compressed work in late April, early May, as opposed to 2 months. So thank you, Mr. Spearman.
Thank you. Any further questions? Nope. Okay, on to debate. Councillor Campbell?
I'll just leave it to the end.
Debate? Any amendments? I see none. Councillor Campbell to close.
I think it's pretty straightforward here. I see Rob has put up his hand.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Miyashiro?
No, never mind.
Okay. All right, with that then, as it is, I will call for the vote.
Question's been called. Do a roll call.
Councillor Morrow.
Favor?
Councillor Parker?
Favor.
Acting Mayor Higgins, sorry.
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Favor.
Mayor Spearman.
Favor.
Campbell.
Favor.
Councillor Carlson.
In favor.
Councillor Kaufman.
In favor.
Councillor Croson.
In favor.
9-0 carried. What else we got? We got the bylaws.
Okay, on to bylaws. Bylaw 6271, local improvement, lane paving, petition number LP 2021-03. I need a mover. Councillor Parker?
Sure, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. For second reading, be it resolved that Bylaw 6271, Local Improvement Lane Paving Petition Number LP 19-03 be given second reading. Councillor Parker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, there's a process in regards to lane paving, and then if the proper petition is filled out with the proper numbers and percentages, it goes to the stage, and now this will allow us to go ahead with the process, so I'd ask for council support.
Thank you. Any questions from council? I see none. Debate? I see none. I'll take that as your opening and your closing. Councillor Parker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. For third reading from Councillor Parker, be it resolved that Bylaw 6271, Local Improvement Lane Paving Petition Number LP-19-03 be given third reading and the Mayor and the City Clerk be authorized to sign and seal the same. Councillor Parker?
Question?
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, next one, very similar, Bylaw 6272, Local Improvement Lane Paving Petition Number LP-19-04. Again, Councillor Parker. For second reading, be it resolved that Bylaw 6272, Local Improvement Lane Paving Petition Number LP-19-04 be given second reading. Councillor Parker.
Just pretty much the same as the last one, and just a different location, Mr. Mayor, so I would just ask for council support.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council? I see none. Any debate? There's none. Okay, I'll take that as your opening and closing. All in favor? Any opposed? There's none. Again, for third reading from Councillor Parker, be it resolved that Bylaw 6272, Local Improvement Lane Paving Petition Number LP-19-04 be given third reading and the Mayor and the City Clerk be authorized to sign and seal the same. Councillor Parker.
Question?
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Thank you. Okay, inquiries. There were no inquiries submitted prior to the meeting. Council updates. Councillor Kaufman, Chair of the Governance Standing Policy Committee, re-proposed form for council and committee reports. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Members of council, you'll see in 9.1 a couple of documents regarding the new reporting process. We discussed this at Governance SPC, at our last Governance SPC meeting. And basically what has been proposed, what's been brought forward, and what we are suggesting to council is a new template for recommendations for information being presented to City Council. The clerk staff has done a yeoman service in going through the current template for information that comes to Council, our RFDs, our requests for decision, and sitting with members of Council to talk about the pros and cons, strengths, weaknesses of the existing template. And what the result of those conversations has entailed is a new document that a couple of things will occur. First of all, if you look at the categories that have been provided for it, it's providing information that council is usually asking. The nice part about this new template is that it actually helps everybody. It helps staff understand or be able to anticipate questions a little bit better. There is a document that will travel with the templates so that there is a consistency as well in how the information is provided, how the form is actually filled out. You'll note as well when you start to see this that every section is actually filled out. Right now when we receive our templates, some departments fill out some information, leave other things. This is actually intended to ensure that council is given the appropriate and proper information in order to make a decision. If we can think of situations where we've kicked things back to administration, usually it's because of the absence of information. And so the idea is to actually get ahead of that, to be anticipatory, and to write these requests for decision in a manner that provides council with the information it requires to make decisions for the best of good governance. I don't know if I'll entertain questions. I might actually ask the clerk to, if there's anything I've missed in this very brief overview, and I'm certain the clerk would be able to answer any questions as well that members of council would have.
Okay, are there any questions? I see none. There are no questions.
Excellent. Then just on behalf of council, if I can, Mayor Spearman, thank you to the clerk and her office for doing the work on this. And again, this is part of ensuring that good governance occurs within our chambers, and appreciate the support and the information they're providing to make us better.
Okay, thank
and I
you.
see has now raised his hand.
Somebody raise their hand?
It's for after this, Your Worship.
After?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you for that update. Okay, we're now on to in-camera resolutions.
One more item, if you want to go back and get one more item.
Which one is that? Already covered it in camera.
Did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 1.8. Yeah. Okay. On to the in-camera resolutions. And I'm just not sure, Councillor Carlson, at what point did you want to speak?
Actually, I think I'm good, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, closed meeting, resolution.
That's yours, Mayor Spearman, so I'll take it.
Okay, thank you.
Moved by Mayor Spearman, item 10.1, closed meeting, City of Lethbridge corporate branding. Be it resolved that City Council direct that the closed meeting discussions, reports, and documents with respect to City of Lethbridge corporate branding remain confidential pursuant to Section 24, advice from officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And further be it resolved that Council expresses support for the initiative and direct that this item be referred to a future in-camera meeting of the Governance Standing Policy Committee, including options for implementation.
Okay.
Mayor Spearman.
Well, it was discussed in camera, so I think the motion speaks for itself.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? There are none.
Yes, Joe.
Oh, Joe, sorry.
Opposes.
Sorry, roll call, please.
Councillor Parker.
In favor?
Acting Mayor Hagan.
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
In favor?
Mayor Spearman.
Favor.
Councillor Campbell.
Favor.
Councillor Carlson.
In favor.
Councillor Kaufman.
In favor?
Councillor Croson.
In favor.
Councillor Morrow.
Opposed.
It's carried 8 to 1.
Thank you. Next one, 10.2, water supply and connections from Councillor Croson. Be it resolved that Council direct that the closed meeting discussions, reports, documents, and presentations with respect to water supply and connections remain confidential pursuant to Sections 23, local public body confidences, 24, advice from officials, and 27, privilege legal of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And further be it resolved that the Mayor and Council authorize administration to amend the current Southeast Water Supply Agreement with Lethbridge County to provide the provision of a second connection point near the airport and an additional 300 cubic meters per day. Councillor Croson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. So of course, this comes out of in-camera, but as has been known for decades, we have provided residential drinking water to the county, And this is doing a second connection as noted near the airport and providing additional 300 cubic meters per day. If there are any questions, I'll entertain them now, or actually ask staff to entertain them now. If not, I'll call the question.
I see no questions. Okay. Okay, question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. We'll move on to the next item, which is Human Resources Matter 10.3. Be it resolved that Council direct that the closed meetings, discussions, reports, documents, and presentations with respect to Human Resources Matter remain confidential pursuant to Sections 23, Local Public Body Confidences, 24, Advice from Officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, and further be it resolved that Council ratify the tentative collective agreement between the City of Lethbridge and the ATU Local 987 accessorite employees as follows. The key terms of the settlement include term, January 1, 2020 to December 31, 2024. Wages, January 1, 2020, 1.5%. January 1, 2021, 0%. January 1, 2022, 0%. January 1, 2023, 1.5%. January 1, 2024, 2%. Other, increase in probation and trial periods from 6 months to 1 year. Increase in disciplinary documentation on file from 18 months to 24 months. Creation of start rate of 90% of full pay for positions previously excluded. Decrease in start rate for operator positions from 97.5% to 90% of full rate. Allow carryover of overtime bank into new calendar year versus payout, 37.5-hour cap. Addition of clause to payout overtime in emergency situations. Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Span. Open up for questions at this time.
There are no questions.
No questions. Is there any debate?
Any debate? I see none.
We'll do the vote by roll call, please.
Sorry, I did have my hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Acting Mayor Higgin.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I do want to speak a little bit to this, and when I see the numbers that are up on the screen, an increase in 2021.5 and 001.5 and 2, we've heard loud and clear across the province, the country, and the world for that matter. We're in a pandemic where there's actually rollbacks through this time, and I'll talk back to a resolution that I brought forward here during our budget deliberations with council, and 10% rollback, also administration at a 0% increase. We're hearing from provincial colleagues that there's 5 to 10% reductions in wages, and so I struggle with what is presented to us in light of everything we've heard, and I believe that it's precedent setting going forward, and for that reason I cannot support this.
Thank you. Any other debate? Okay. Call Councillor Miyashiro to close.
Oh, no, call the question by roll call, please.
Okay, Acting Mayor Higgin.
Opposed.
Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
In favor.
Mayor Spearman.
In favor.
Councillor Campbell.
In favor.
Councillor Carlson.
In favor.
Thank you.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button.
Councillor Kaufman.
In favor.
Councillor Crowson.
In favor.
Councillor Morrow.
Opposed.
Councillor Parker.
Favor.
That's carried 7-2.
Thank you. We'll now move on to 10.5, from Councillor Parker, public member appointments to boards, commissions, and committees. Be it resolved that Council direct that the closed meeting discussions, reports, documents, and presentations with respect to public member appointments to boards, commissions, and committees remain confidential pursuant to Sections 19, confidential evaluations, 23, local public body confidences, and 24, advice from officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And further be it resolved that Council appoint the following public members to internal and external boards, commissions, and committees of Council. The Galt Museum Board, Gerald Hybert, 3-year term expiring December 23. Devin Smither, 3-year term expiring December 2023. Lethbridge Library Board, Angela Viola, 3-year term expiring December 2023. Further be it resolved that the following individuals be thanked for their service on City Council Board, Commission, or Committee. Simon Griffiths, Kim Seaver, Councillor Ryan Parker, and Councillor Mark Campbell. And further be it resolved that Council grant an exception to Council Committee Policy CC 46, Section 4.7, citizen appointments shall be all residents of the City of Lethbridge for the recommended candidate for appointment to the Lethbridge Police Commission, and proceed with the police information check to return to a future in-camera council meeting. Councillor Parker?
Mr. Mayor, I think I'm guessing there might be a request to divide this resolution.
Yeah.
And that
Yes,
after we thank, yeah, I thought there would be, just because there is kind of two independent things within this resolution. So I'm guessing, do I need to make that, or do I have to wait for one of my colleagues to make that motion to divide?
Is somebody making that motion to divide?
Well, I will, but if it's Councillor Parker's resolution and he wants to do it, he can do it as well.
I think out of fairness, I would like to have it divided. I think it might be a good idea.
Okay, so to separate the last clause?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we will vote on the first, right down to the end of thanking individuals for their service, and the 4 individuals are named. So we'll deal with that first.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any questions? Any debate on the first part? I see none. All in favor? Are any opposed to the appointments and the thanks? There are none. Okay, now second motion is further be resolved that Council grant an exception to Council Committee Policy CC 46, Section 4.7. Citizen appointments shall be residents of the City of Lethbridge for the recommended candidate for appointment to the Lethbridge Police Commission, and proceed with the police information check to return to a future in-camera meeting. So moved by Councillor Parker. Questions?
I do believe Councillor Morrow has a question.
Councillor Morrow?
Can someone please explain to me why we would allow anybody who does not live in Lethbridge, who does not pay taxes in Lethbridge, sit on committees that make decisions for the people of Lethbridge?
Okay, would somebody who was on the committee please provide an answer?
I think this is a broader question than just this single time, because from what I understand, we have done this in the past. We have appointed people who live from outside the city because we are looking for skills. We want the best possible people to sit on these committees. And there are people in the region who have this. I know we've had this conversation, hasn't happened yet, but we've had this conversation with relying, like with connection to things like the airport and other things where it has a regional impact. So while we have a committee policy to try to have people from the City of Lethbridge, we have in other times gone beyond, because the entire purpose is to put together the best possible committee. We want the skills to be around there. We need governance background. We need people who can do it. And sometimes they may live just outside the city limits.
So I totally understand that we may have done this in the past, and if my recollection is correct, my guess is that we've done it because we could not find anybody in the city of Lethbridge that wanted to be involved in whatever committee we're dealing about. This particular one, if I'm not mistaken, we're dealing with the police commission, and enclosed in some of the package that I have, I reviewed the list of candidates. And I can tell you that there were many, many candidates who live in Lethbridge that seem to be very, very qualified, probably more qualified, and yet we're picking someone from out of town. And I don't have a problem with the individual from out of town, but I'm still struggling with why we are going to this extreme when they don't pay taxes. So is this done by a committee, or was this chosen by the interview committee of the police commission?
There were 3 members of the police commission who sat and interviewed for this position, and this was the decision made by the commission, or by that group.
Thank you.
Acting Mayor Hagan.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Going back, we were discussing about those individuals that were selected for previously to sit on committees that were not from the community. And just to Councillor Morrow's point, from my understanding and anything that I've looked up, that was because we could not find somebody to sit on that committee. I totally agree. These individuals that sit on these committees should indeed be from the community and should, making decisions for the community that they live in. So, yeah, for that reason, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. That sounded like debate. Okay. With that, we'll move on to further debate. Anybody else in debate on this second part of the resolution? Okay.
My hand's up, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, go ahead.
My hand's up, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to debate. That was questions earlier. You know what? I really, really, really struggle, and I'm encouraging my colleagues to not go down this path. It is just not the right thing to do. Earlier on today, one of my colleagues said that there are times that there are things that we need to do because they're simply the right thing to do. We have over 100,000 people in this city. We have 37,000 to 40,000 households that pay taxes. We have businesses that pay taxes. We have people I know that want to sit on the police commission for some reason or another. They seem to think that that is the most highly sought after commission and committee to sit on. We've never had a problem with applicants from our city apply for the commission. And now you're telling me that we have to change the rules to allow someone who does not live in Lethbridge, but may move to Lethbridge, someone who lives more than 30 miles away, and they're going to make decisions on our number one commission, the police commission, the one that deals with the most amount of money, has the most amount of controversy that goes on, and yet my colleagues are seriously considering bending the policy to allow this to happen. I don't think we should have this to happen, period. We've got great people in our community that are stepping forward. And I can tell you, if the candidates that I reviewed would not be qualified, or if I felt in any way that but even at that, they are our citizens that are applying and want to contribute. And we are saying to them, no thanks. We have someone from out of town that can do the job and is more qualified than you are. I don't believe there's anybody that's more qualified to sit on any of our committees. There's nobody more qualified than our own residents who live here, spend all their money here, work here, and do everything that they have to do here. So I strongly will not support this, and I encourage my colleagues to not support this as well, because there were a ton of great candidates that could fill that position on the police commission.
Further debate to Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I will be supporting this based on a couple of factors. Mostly that this is the recommendation of the committee, and it was members of the commission who are making this recommendation. I think it's no secret that our commission has had some challenges over the last little while, and they probably identified characteristics, etc., that would be very helpful to the commission. And so the fact that the commission, members of the commission did the interviews on this and are making this recommendation, I'm assuming, or I will place my trust in them, that this is the candidate that they needed, not speaking against any of the other candidates. I'm sure there are excellent other candidates, but after interviewing them all and just making their deliberations, I'll support the committee's wishes on this.
Thank you. Acting Mayor Higgin?
Thank you. I just want to do a point of clarification. I was on that committee. I do sit on the police commission, and I do not support this.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Kaufman?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. First of all, taxation has nothing to do with serving on committees. I do think that point needs to be made. Taxation in municipal government is based on property, and you can be a renter, you could be a student, you could be a, whatever the situation is. We have to make sure that we clarify that point. I think, sadly, while I agree with the statement that the commission has made the decision, I think we have now done enough to taint the process that any recommendation to put this individual into the position is going to be open to criticism and critique, and I'm not prepared to put anybody into that limelight. The statements have been made about lack of support of process, and I get process. Should always be a conversation about process, but we've gone across that line to state that there are people with just as comparable skills within the city of Lethbridge, even though the commission may have identified that individual as having the skills that they need. I think we do need to have a conversation at some point about how we address this in the future. But for now, the process in my mind has been tainted, and I feel very badly for the recommendation coming from the commission, but I will not support waiving it in order to keep that person from having to deal with the consequences of our conversation here.
Any further debate? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, can I please close on this?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate, I wanted this to be brought forward because before we move forward, I think we need to first adjust the policy, and that's why we have to vote on this. We're not setting a precedent. Of course, we have done it in the past, but I think the key point here is when we advertise and we ask for people to put their name forward on committees, we don't send it and say you can live outside the city of Lethbridge. I think the criteria says you have to be a citizen of Lethbridge, and that's otherwise we should just open it up to anyone who lives in the region or the regional area of Lethbridge. So all I want to do is I want to make sure this is brought on the table before we move forward. I think everyone makes a very good point on this. So, and I think Councillor Campbell makes a really good point in regards to we kind of taint whoever's put in this position if they're going to have that. So for that reason, I won't be supporting it as well.
Okay.
I'll call the question, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, question's been called.
Deputy Mayor Miyashiro.
In favor.
Mayor Spearman.
In favor.
Councillor Campbell.
Opposed.
Councillor Carlson.
In favor.
Councillor Kaufman.
Opposed.
Councillor Crowson.
In favor.
Councillor Morrow.
Opposed?
Councillor Parker.
Opposed.
Acting Mayor Higgin.
Opposed.
4 to 5, that's lost.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, This one is also from me. Councillor, Deputy Mayor Miyashiro, can you read this one, please? 10.6.
Yeah, I have it. I actually have it on my screen too, so. Just 1 second here. Item 10.6, organizational representatives on boards, commissions, and committees. Be it resolved that council directed the closed meeting discussions, reports, documents, and presentations with respect to organizational representatives on boards, commissions, and committees remain confidential pursuant to sections 19, confidential evaluations, 23, local public body confidences, and 24, advice from officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, and further be it resolved, the council ratify the following organizational representatives on council, internal and external boards, commissions, and committees. Economic Development Lethbridge, Roy Pogrzelski, Indigenous Sector, 2-year term, and Pat Santa, Senior Sector, Norbridge Rotation, 2-year term. Reconciliation Lethbridge Advisory Committee, Sean Singer, term length of 2 years, Echo Novak, term length of 2 years, and Rachel Hoof, term length of 2 years. And further be resolved that the following individuals be thanked for their service on a City Council Board, Commissioner Committee: Les Vonkman, Travis Plated Hair, Jordan Head, Karen Johnson, and Katie Jo Rabbit. Mayor Spearman.
I think it's fairly straightforward. The terms are expiring for some people. We're thanking them for their service, and we're appointing replacements who have been recommended by the organizations that they are serving on. So just answer any questions. There are no questions. Then my opening is...
question.
Pardon?
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, my recommendation to council is to approve these individuals.
Are you calling the question, Mr. Spearman?
Yeah, is there any debate? Yeah, I call the question.
There's no debate.
Okay.
Question been called. Any opposed? There are none that I can see. That is carried.
Thank you. Now I have a resolution from Councillor Campbell. Closed meeting omnibus motion 10.4, 10.7, and 10.8. Be it resolved that council direct that the closed meeting discussions, reports, and documents with respect to intergovernmental relations, land matter, and human resources matter number 2 remain confidential, subject to section 21, harmful to intergovernmental affairs, and 24, advice from officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Councillor Campbell?
Call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Finally, I have a resolution from Councillor Parker for adjournment that we do now adjourn the regular meeting of City Council until Tuesday, March the 23rd, 2021. Councillor Parker?
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Thank you.